Hello, welcome to the Organic Wine Podcast. I'm Adam Huss, coming to you from Los Angeles, California. Thanks so much for listening. And a big thanks to Richard Hankey for your donation to support the Organic Wine Podcast. It means a lot. Financial support like yours makes it possible for me to continue to prioritize the many hours of time it takes to produce each episode. I really appreciate it. And if you'd like to support a regenerative, ecological approach to wine and life, you can Venmo a donation to @Centralis. That's @CENTRALAS. And it will be associated with my name, Adam Huss, and I really appreciate your support in whatever form. My guests for this episode are Nicole Dooling and Michael Frey. Nicole and Michael helped transition Nicole's parents' mountaintop vineyard in Medocino into the first ever Savory Institute Global Land to Market verified vineyard in the world. We talk in depth about the land to market certification, which is results-based rather than process-based like most other certifications, and takes most of the work of certification off the farmer's to-do list. And we talk about the process that Nicole and Michael went through to help convince her parents, the Doolings, to make this transition after 40 years of pouring their hearts and souls into Mariah Vineyards. And it took a lot of respect and commitment to the economic as well as the ecological success of the farm. This generational transition and how to navigate it is vital to regenerative agriculture, and this conversation has some amazing insights into it. There are also some important new ideas, including how to be regenerative as a winemaker or consumer, even if you don't do any farming personally, as well as some perspective shifts about transitioning to a nature-based style of farming that may have a slightly more wild and messy aesthetic. And we mentioned several great resources for anyone interested in learning or doing more. Nicole and Michael leave us also with a challenge that if you are claiming to be regenerative, then show it with quantifiable results. It's a great challenge, and I hope it inspires us to strive to be more fact-based and evidence-based in our claims about what we're doing with our farming as well as our practices in wine. Enjoy. Nicole and Michael, thank you so much for doing this. Welcome.
Nice to be here.
Nice to be you. Thank you for having us.
All right, so we just have been chatting, and I want you guys to just lay the groundwork for everybody. Where are you, and how did you sort of get there? Please.
Um, okay, so I guess maybe it makes sense to start at the beginning, which is for me, Mariah Vineyards. It's uh, my parents found this land in 1979, and my dad's dream to plant a mountain vineyard in the middle of nowhere, which is where I grew up. It's
That's nice.
Mariah Vineyards is in the Mendocino Ridge AVA. It's at 2,400 feet. It's all dry farmed. Anyways, but that's where I grew up. Interesting,
And we'll just tease. So it's dry farmed. It's also, you guys made it the pilot vineyard for the Savory Institute's global land to market verification. And so it
Yes,
is now land to market verified, the first vineyard in the world to achieve that. Is that correct?
yes.
Okay. And
So
so that just a
yeah,
teaser. We'll come back to that, of
yes,
course. But
we'll get to that because yeah, that is something that we have done. Michael and I have done with my parents, Dan and Vicky, achieved that. Also, obviously, with Land to Market and Savory folks. But yeah, so that's where I grew up, and went off and did my own thing for a long time, and actually, I'm an emergency room nurse in San Francisco for the last 12 years, and yeah,
well,
I
wait, I just have to stop you there. So the last couple years must have been interesting
yes.
as a nurse in an ER during a pandemic in San Francisco.
Oh yeah, we could do a whole podcast about that if you want.
Well, I mean, I think all of us will just say thank you. Just the short story from our perspective.
Well,
Thank you.
yeah, it's been a roller coaster over the last couple of years, with many different things. Of course, the pandemic, but also in an amazing way, really like kind of returning with boots on the ground back at my family's vineyard. Believe me, I never thought, I mean, I couldn't get out of there fast enough when I was, graduating high school. Not that I didn't, I mean, I had a great childhood and everything, but I was commuting to school in Medocino. And anyway, so I went off, and as I'm the oldest of 4 kids, actually, we've all found our ways into different things, not really so much farming. And a couple of years ago, I was traveling in Peru, getting ready to shift my nursing career a little bit into possibly flight nursing, getting out of the ER, and took a trip to Peru with my mom, and met this Swiss guy who I'm sitting next to now in life. And yeah, it shifted a lot of different things in different ways. And the short version is we ended up learning about a regenerative agriculture conference called the Regenerative Earth Summit
It was the Regenerative Earth Summit in Boulder,
in Colorado. And this was like the fall of 2019. So my dad's good friend and family friend, Paul Dolan, who is a name in the wine world, as you probably know, he, he has been our mentor in many different ways through our business and things. But he suggested we go to this Earth Summit. We're like, all right, sounds great. So we go. It was a freaking snowstorm in October. And anyway, we go to this Earth Summit, and we were just blown away with what was happening with regards to regenerative agriculture, which we were just learning about. And all of these amazing people out there doing great things.
Was that what blew you away? Can I ask, was that what blew you away? Was it the science? Was it the projects that people were working on? Was it what was it?
I mean, a little bit of everything. Like Charles Eisenstein was there, who's like a writer. There was farmers there. There was a doctor there. Will Harris was there, who I have a funny story about that. And so we were like, why isn't everybody farming with this approach? Speaking about all the pillars of regenerative agriculture, no-till, cover cropping, animal integration, obviously, not using agrochemicals. And
so for me, it was, we are so overwhelmed with news out there, and, the world is ending and stuff. And then we went to this summit, and people were speaking about bringing back biodiversity, sequestering carbon, all this amazing stuff, and soil health, and it was just like
water conservation.
It was an epiphany. It was a spark, and it was like a realization that there's stuff that you can do, and where you really can push the needle, and that was the beginning of our rabbit hole.
Yeah, it really it really sparked where we are today with Mariah Vineyards, and where we are today in our own ways of trying to accelerate regenerative agriculture. Basically we met a lot of great people. It was really interesting. It was a small group. It wasn't a large group of people, but the very beginning of this 2-day summit, they had us do this like warming up exercise, and they were like, look around the room and find somebody who's not at your table. And like, this is before the pandemic, and it was like, you had to play this game where you had to like find somebody and sit and like stare at them for an uncomfortable amount of time. And just to like break the ice.
It was an exercise that people realize that you feel comfortable if you are in a room with people that you don't know, and that everybody is realizing that they have the same weird feeling, so that it shouldn't be a problem to reach out and start conversations and start networking and stuff like that.
So I look around the room, and the person who stands out to me as like probably one of the like only real farmers in serious farmers in the room was Will Harris. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's
I do know his name. Can you remind?
He has White Oak pastures in
White
Georgia.
Oak. That's right.
And he's like He's an interesting cat, that's for sure. He's awesome. But so I see this man who's dressed to the nines with his nice cowboy hat and his leather. I can picture him. And I mean, he reminded me, not in just in his demeanor, of my dad. And I looked and I saw his hands and I was like, that's a farmer. And he had like hard farming hands like my dad had. And I was like, that's the guy I want to look at, stare at. Cause that, I don't know. I just was drawn to him because he was really the real farmer in the room to me. And so I had this uncomfortable, kind of awesome, like situation where I had to stare into Will Harris's eyes for, I don't know, minutes. And anyways, long story short, we ended up having a long we spent a lot of time just in conversations with him throughout the summit, and he was really pushing out. He's also a huge wine lover, by the way. Yeah, he's got a very large ranch in Georgia, and like has really been a face of a lot of regenerative agriculture.
Yes.
He's also a Savory hub. And he was really pushing us. He was like, you got to talk to these Savory folks. You got to talk to your hub in California. Talk to them, just start the conversation, you know? And so really he kind of pushed us to really start this conversation with some of these Savory folks. And we were just like, hey, like, how come, what, you know, when we were learning about the Savory Institute, and turns out they do a lot of, you know, it was mainly grasslands, beef, bison,
leather, wool.
Yeah, wool, a lot of things like that around the world. It was really interesting. And we're like, how come this doesn't exist in you know, cropping systems or in vineyards? And they're like, well, we just haven't like gone into that. And it really started this conversation that we started having with our California hub at the time. And then
we were intrigued. We looked into the Savory Institute, and we looked in the ecological outcome verification. That's the process in the back, and we really loved that it's an outcome based approach. So in regular certifications and verifications, you're looking at processes and you track processes. And the Savory Institute really, or Land to Market, really provided an outcome base. And I don't know if it's because I'm Swiss and you know, I really don't know. But we really loved that you can back up what you say, you know. So to go on your land, to implement all these practices, to go out and claim a regeneration, that's quite a claim, you know. And so when we found the solution with Land to Market and really saw that you can actually back it up with results, we were really intrigued with that. Sorry to interrupt, Nicole.
Should we wait to jump into that? Do you want to finish bringing us up to the present, Nicole?
Yeah, basically that was, you know, we came home from this summit and we went to my parents. I think around the same time we went to a CalCan thing, and I think it was really like when I was starting to really, I mean, when you grow up in a farming, it's just like what your parents do. Like, it's not, you know, I remember applying for college and I was like, what do I put on my application as, like, you know, my parents' job? And my mom's like farmer or owner operator. I was like, farmer? Nobody's going to put farmer on their college application. You know, like I remember being like weirdly like, is that what I really have to put? And then over the last couple of years, I've been like, I'm so freaking proud that my parents are farmers. Like I've gone back to my parents. I'm like, you guys are awesome. Like, and I didn't have this understanding or respect. And I feel like it's lacking in general across the board for farming. But I'm so proud of the things that my parents have done. And when we came back from this summit, we just were just so excited. We're like, this is amazing. You can sequester carbon. You can do all this cool stuff. Like, we've got to do this, Dad. I was like, Dad, I know you're like already like permanent cover. Like, you're doing all this good stuff. You're basically farming organically at the time, you know, like all these things. I was like, and you're dry farming. I was
Yeah,
like,
and we committed to jump in and to support on this path. So
yeah. So we were like really excited. My mom's like, this sounds great. And my dad's like, what do I have to do? And I was like, Dad, it'll be fine. We'll figure it out and we'll help. We'll jump in. And he was like, I don't know, like, and then so we started, Michael and I handled it. We started all these conversations. And meanwhile, we came up with this plan to be the pilot vineyard for them for the Atlanta market verification to, I guess they don't like trial their EOV, ecological outcome verification on our vineyard. So that's where it started, and the pandemic hit. So our baseline study was a little bit later that year, but it was in early June of 2020. And it was great. I mean, we had this, we can go into detail about what our baseline really looked like, but I mean, it's pretty comprehensive. It was quite amazing. And that's where
we got
started.
verified. We got verified
1 year later.
1 year later, and launched the first land to market verified wines.
Yes.
Nice.
Outcome based regeneration in a bottle.
Mariah Vineyards.
Yeah.
So that's up to date. Pretty much. Of
Right.
where we
And
found land.
yeah, there's and I know some it has what's the word, sort of what am I trying to say? It has inspired you in some other directions, I think. It is sort of, I was trying to look for a pun having to do with growing things, but sprouting, new ideas have sprouted.
Yes. But, and for me personally, like, I mean, not just through the pandemic really, but just in general, like I find myself, feeling like I can do more good working in this regenerative agriculture space, within my family's vineyard, but also beyond that, than I can right now in a broken healthcare system. So that's my personal thing, is I'm really drawn to this right now, is really getting me through this kind of hard time working in the, Western healthcare system. Yeah, it's been a balancing act.
Can I ask you, has it changed? Like, has it changed the way that you see what you're doing, in the sense that when somebody comes in, you are now thinking, you know what, they're here because of the way that our food is grown in this country.
Oh my God, absolutely. And I'm, the reason I'm still in a space like this is because at the end of the day, with trauma and major medical, there is nothing better than Western medicine to fix your heart or fix the hole or whatever it is, or pump you full of epi to restart your heart. Like these things, no amount of, healthy soil can fix those kind of things. But almost a majority of what walks through those doors, I have a really hard time, because I see that our food system, is broken. Our soil is completely degraded and toxic, and it's making us sick. I mean, there are amazing people out there really like waving the flags about this. There's, Zach Bush, there's Daphne Miller. Like there's a lot of medically trained doctors and that are really understanding this real connection between the land, the soil, our health, our gut microbiome. And so I'm very, very intrigued with that. And we met with Laura Catena quite a few years ago. She used to be an ER doctor. She's retired now, actually. But she told me, and she's leading the way with her family wines.
She's working for,
she's retired as an ER doctor.
Yes.
And she told me this a couple of years ago, and she was like, I find myself in these resuscitation rooms thinking about the sustainability work she's doing on her vineyards and things like that. And she just was like, I feel like I can do more good in this agriculture space than I can in this trauma room right now, or whatever resuscitation she was in. And she decided to shift gears. And I feel like I'm approaching that or I need to find another space in healthcare where I can integrate these other ideas better. But right now I'm just trying to balance all the things that we're working on. So, but yes, you're absolutely right. It's really inspiring me to like get my hands dirty and really find a way to integrate my I guess, healthcare skill set with my love of soil and regeneration. So we'll see where it goes. I can tell you the emergency room is a really hard place to be when you have when you're looking at things the way I'm seeing the world now. So I don't know what the answer is, but I'm definitely feel that I can do more good in this space of working to accelerate regenerative agriculture somehow, working on my family's vineyard. I think I can do a lot more good than I can kind of, I don't know, spinning my wheels in the emergency room right now. But I mean, I think there's a lot of really good stuff. People are really starting to understand this interconnection of, obviously, planetary health as well as human health is so interconnected to our soil. And we really need to focus on our soil. And it is very, very integral to the overall health and well-being of everything on our planet, including ourselves. So yeah, that interconnection is a personal, I don't know, I guess passion. And
Oh yeah,
we'll
definitely.
see where it ends up for me. But right now I'm just trying to balance all the things, Mariah, dirt, and my ER job.
This is not your retirement from nursing announcement podcast.
No, not at all. I do love my job. I work with some of the most amazing people. I mean, I'm still very much like I love my job, and so all of my jobs.
Of course, yeah. Well, I love everything that you were saying. I wonder. I just had a interview, my most recent podcast, or 2 ago, with Dr. David Montgomery and Anne Biclay, who wrote "What Your Food Ate." Have you guys read that book? Are you aware of that?
I am aware of that. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, and I actually started listening to that your podcast with
Yeah.
them. They're great.
Yeah, it's they are great, and I mean, dirt and soil is what they're all about, and that book is the one where you can clearly see, like, if you read their books in sequence, this rabbit hole and where it's led them,
Mm.
and now they're at this point where it clearly is connected to nutrition and human health, and that's what your food aid is about. How, I mean, what it's about is really how we grow, like how we farm actually affects the nutritional content of our food, and all the studies that are showing that. But really,
And
then
that the
further the
calorie is not a calorie, I think. Yeah,
exactly, like we
yeah, it's
figured out
awesome.
how to make calories, but we haven't figured out how to make nutrition
Mhm.
yet. I mean, I think we have figured out, and you guys are part of that. That's part of the regenerative soil initiatives. But yeah, it's very cool to see that connection from your perspective, from the healthcare perspective. I love hearing that, and yeah, I mean, it's just a fascinating thing. I didn't even think we would talk about that, but that's so amazing.
Yeah,
Let's
I
go
mean,
back.
hopefully doctors are now being trained a little bit more in nutrition or even soil health or things like that eventually in the
Yeah.
future.
Well, and a couple other things. I mean, if anything, with this podcast, I just put it out there for the world listening. I want what you said to become true, which is that farmers get their due, that farmers become cool. Because I know, like, the same thing when I was growing up, it's like, like, it is literally like a hierarchical lower class to be a farmer. The way that I was, the way that it's thought of as you're thinking about what direction you want to take in high school, for example. Do you want to take the college prep classes? Do you want to, you know what I mean? That whole
Mm.
sense of, oh, you don't go to that school, that's an ag school kind of thing. Like, you don't want to go, that's not like a university or whatever, and it doesn't have, and it's like that stuff is so toxic and so unproductive, and now we're reaping that, like
Mhm.
literally reaping that, and figuratively. And yeah, if by making farm if I in any way can make farmers cooler and farming more sexy with this podcast, I hope to. It's one of my great wishes. So I'm glad you
That's
brought that
awesome.
up. And how
And
you
that
guys,
was
That,
something that they said that was mentioned at the Regenerative Earth Summit. I think it was even Will Harris or somebody said something about we've got to make farmers famous the way
yeah,
chefs were in the
chefs
past.
were in the past. They were line cooks and play no chefs were not
Right.
known. We just cooked food places and people bought it or didn't buy it, and now chefs, I mean, I don't even know how many TV shows are about chefs. I mean, it's
Yeah.
ridiculous and amazing, but like like farmers feed the entire world. They grow the food.
Yeah.
They do. I mean, but they're the ones with their backs to the wall with, I mean, what are they, farmers
Financially, yeah.
financially are just at the bottom of the food chain, literally.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it's
But
just,
I think it's awesome. There would be amazing stories to tell,
yes.
Yeah. Well,
from
it's
the day of a farmer with welding and fixing and farming and doing that's pretty awesome
Because
actually.
I mean,
yeah.
even just my dad. I mean, he's been a farm. Or first, he was a truck driver. I've backed up more miles than you've driven forward. Is the thing I've grown up with. And then my response is, I've driven more miles on the other side of the road than you have because I've lived in other countries. But anyways, but he's a farmer, but he's an electrician. He's a welder. He is a mechanic. He is constantly having to fix things, and especially where we are, I mean, out this really far out rural vineyard, like there's no John Deere tractor store down the road.
Yeah.
So he has to haul his stuff like far away to get things fixed, or he's learned to fix them. So
Yeah.
being a farmer is like a jack of all trades.
Right. It's a problem
So
solver, right? It's yeah, I mean, that's, yeah. Like, and the other thing that I think is really, people aren't, people haven't thought about it this way, which is how farmers take on literally all the risk and get the
yes.
lowest reward for that. Like in any other form of investing, the person who takes the most risk gets the biggest reward. And that's completely flipped for farming. The farmer takes all the
Yes.
risk, and all they have to, and the buyers and the seller of products to these people, the seller of seed, they take no risk. I mean, they get to just
Mhm.
cash out whatever, and then they get, the commodity market prices are set for the products, which have no sometimes relation to, the risk that the farmer has taken to get to that point where they actually have a product and how much product they have because of all of those risks that they've taken.
And they
Um,
usually sell it at
And
really low
I
prices.
think especially in viticulture too, where everything goes back to appellations too. With pricing, it depends where you grow, and you have your tonnage prices, and it's mostly doesn't really depend if you farm organically, or it's more based on supply and demand and where you grow.
right.
Or where the
Yeah.
winery is located. It doesn't even have to do with where it's grown, right? So a winery in a high-end appellation can pull their
Right.
fruit from wherever they want, and the brand, that's the
Regardless of
lack
the
of
fact that they've just,
transparency.
yeah, regardless of the fact that they've nuked the soil with glyphosate and they spray,
Mhm.
just systemic fungicides like on the regular, and yeah, don't the far, whatever. There's no sense of uh anything other than it's Napa, it's, whatever, Hal Mountain or whatever.
And
um
that's what's really interesting about the world of wine, I think too. And like this is conversations Michael and I have had quite a bit recently is in the wine industry, I mean, there's so much communication out there, but everybody speaks about terroir and this sense of place in the soil and they taste all that, all this. I'm not a winemaker, I don't know, but like, the consumers, everybody's so enthralled with this terroir, but yet, nobody's really focusing on the actual soil or the actual place that the fruit is coming from.
yeah.
So, and I mean, yes, being in the industry, you understand a single vineyard designate, but most consumers just look at a label and buy a bottle. Like, and if it's a winery from, Paso Robles or Napa or wherever it is, or they aren't really concerned with where the grapes are being grown or coming from, but they've got a lot to say about terroir, but they don't understand where it comes from. And, like it's important to know where your food comes from. Why isn't it also just as important to know where the grapes are coming from that go into your wines?
Yes.
Yeah. Just
I mean, I'm just gonna throw this out there as if you are a winemaker who doesn't farm, so I know we're gonna be talking a lot about farming, but if you aren't a farmer but you're a winemaker and you're responsible for buying grapes, I think one of the most important regenerative, you know, positive practices that you can do is to contract for entire vineyards or entire vineyard blocks rather than for by the ton, so that you and in exchange for the farmer farming in a good way, like if you're like you can if you commit to relieving the farmer of the risk of the yield uh, for that block or vineyard. I don't know, and I would love to hear your guys' thoughts about this, but if you relieve the farm of that risk in exchange for asking them to stop using whatever it is, systemic chemicals or glyphosate or whatever the practice is that you're trying to regenerate, that to me just seems like the way to go. Like, be part of the solution as somebody who has the power to buy grapes, who chooses to buy grapes. Don't buy the ton, commit to a block and take some of that risk, take all that risk
absolutely, yeah.
for yield.
I think in our conversations that we have as the first Savory pilot, several vineyards reached out, and we had discussion, and the biggest barrier to transition to regenerative farming practices is actually the money side, because we discussed that previously. It doesn't mean that when I farm organically that I get a higher price. Consumers are willing to pay a premium for organic products in the grocery store, but that's not how real life is in the wine industry, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I think the financial side is really important. But what we realized is that the only way that works is by supply and demand.
Yeah.
So we weren't able so far that the winery came to us and said, if I take this block and I pay you a premium and do that, it's more you have a bigger demand, and then you can ask for higher price.
Yeah, that
It's
is
always it's always this. It would be absolutely amazing if it would be, and then there's the reality, and
But
the
I feel
yeah.
like some winemakers are really taking that on. I mean,
Sure.
in order to, maybe not necessarily, I mean, I think some winemakers are really starting to really pay attention to the farming practices that are happening on the ground of the fruit that they buy. We've definitely had winemakers discussing different vineyard practices, such as like tipping and leafing and certain things that they do or don't want in their blocks.
Right.
But then, as a farmer, you're farming your entire property very differently and for so many rows for this winemaker. And so, so,
Yeah.
No, but no, yeah, but that's
it's,
but that's
it's
also
great.
but that's also amazing. So I didn't mean that in a negative way. So we farm organically. We are dry farmed. We are on 2,400 feet. We have a lot of acidity in our fruit. We have at certain spot organic matter of 12%.
Wow.
And these are all arguments that actually resulted in an increase of demand, and then in an increase of profitability.
Yeah.
And what I mentioned before, and we can back it up through outcomes through the
And
land
it's,
to market verification. So
and
it's not just claims; it's actual facts.
And the other thing too, on a side note, is we are relatively cool climate, higher elevation, and I mean, knock on wood, we haven't been terribly had some big problems from any smoke. We've had a lot of, there's been a lot of fires in Northern California
Yeah.
for the last couple of years. So that has pushed a lot of wineries, big and small, to source fruit from other places, including Mendocino County. I'm not saying that's the
Right.
sole reason, but it's really Mendocino County, I think, is really kind of, um, uh, being put on the map because of those kind of things. Has been a lot more sourcing from up there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know prices obviously, like as real estate prices continue to climb in Napa and Sonoma, grape prices mirror that. And, there's 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 only so many consumers that can pay $100 for a bottle of wine,
Oh yeah, sure.
$200. And at a certain point, if you're trying to sell wine, you need to make that wine for less so that you can sell it for less. And I know Mendocino then becomes a more attractive option if your real estate for your winery is Sonoma or Napa.
And Mendocino too, I mean, on the grand scheme of things, is a much more rural county. I'm not here like selling Mendocino fruit or anything, but these vineyards they're very much more spread out. Like for example, like our vineyard on the top of this mountaintop, there is no farming system anywhere near us. I mean, the closest thing is is actually another vineyard, a part of this Mendocino Ridge appellation. And I mean, by the way the crow flies, it's still like a couple miles away. So we don't have drift. So when we say we're farming organically and regeneratively, like we don't have anything really, polluting our air or our soil or our water. And fortunately, I mean, we're in a very, unique little island up there, but, we're the top of the watershed. So it's also very important that we aren't polluting into the watershed, being the top of that mountain. But at least, so I'm just making, a perspective, at least for Mariah Vineyards, is quite a unique spot in the agricultural world, because it is so rural. Like,
have you considered bees?
So
because it sounds like you could potentially even make organic honey with being, because they're so isolated.
Yes, I have been on a quest for like the last 2 years, reaching out to local bee people, and with the pandemic, I think got a little bit, people were anyway. But recently, a couple months ago, this local girl in Fort Bragg finally wrote me back, part of this Mendocino coastal beekeeper folks, and she was like, "I'm super interested," because I was just like, "Hey, I've got a lot going on. I just didn't really know how to like take on beekeeping necessarily. And obviously grapevines don't need pollination. But anybody who's probably listening to this probably understands that like bees are really, really important and they're really in danger. And we need to do what we can to save bees, to save our food system, to save it's a kingpin species here. This girl wrote me back and she was super interested in treatment-free beekeeping.
She's amazing.
She's really
extremely passionate and so really a possibility to start a regenerative approach.
Yeah, so regenerative beekeeping. So we have a single hive at the moment, which we'll plan to split in the spring. I mean, we have a lot of bees around, just native bees. But we have a hive. They're doing okay. They're on top of like one of our old shops, just because we have bears, which unfortunately just rolled over our fences after harvest last year.
No, we have them back up now.
And we have them in there again. So to protect this hive, we have it up on top of a shed. But yes, we just are entering it, and I'm super open to learning as much as I can about beekeeping through Kaylin. So we'll keep you posted on that.
Yeah, no, there's a really good. I know this is totally random, but since you're thinking about it and we're talking, there's a really good regenerative forestry. Or no, it's not it's like regenerative agroforestry, or it's agroforestry podcast put out by I think University of Missouri or something like that. Hey, just to confirm, if you are interested, it is called the Agroforestry Podcast, put out by the University of Missouri Center for Agroforestry. They cover all of these topics. They do an amazing episode about beekeeping and how to just essentially start beekeeping with wild bees by, essentially what you're doing. You put up a little swarm trap, which is just a home for a swarm to find up in a tree, in the spring or whenever they're swarming. And then you can just, bring them down and put them into a box, and you don't have to like buy a queen or anything like that. You're basically providing housing for bees and
Awesome.
letting the wild bees move in. Anyway, it's a great episode. You get ton of great information from it if you want to check it out. And anybody else listening, it's actually a really great agroforestry. It sounds like you guys are in that position where you're doing perennial, regenerative agriculture and in the middle of forests. So you could probably apply a lot of that in the same way.
Yeah.
So, well, I want to jump back because maybe you guys were touching on a lot of this stuff, and maybe a good way into this is something that you said when you were sort of talking about how you got to this point, and your father's reaction, Nicole, to saying, "Hey, this is you're so excited and you've learned all this stuff, your minds have been blown, and you're like, let's do this," and he's like, "All right, what do I have to do?" So, what was that process like, and what did you have to do? Like, what was the process like working with him and him? Has he warmed up to it, and have you guys butt heads, and what was his perspective on all of this stuff? I'd love to hear that just from that, what you mentioned before we started recording about just the generational thing that can happen with farms and is happening a lot now, and to lead that into what the practices are that you actually initiated and started measuring and those kind of things.
Michael and I both, mind blown with regenerative agriculture, and not having our own land. We
Right.
we went to my parents and we were like, guys, this is amazing. We got to do this. And, my mom, like, before even finishing the sentence, was like, yep, okay, on board, let's go. And my dad, like I mentioned, was like, what do I have to do differently? Because so it, to be honest, he could tell the exact year, but
he's amazing.
He's been farming.
He's amazing.
They have been up there farming. I don't know if you want to call it sustainable, or they were verified or certified sustainable and stuff. But he was, for him, that vineyard that him and my mom have put their blood, sweat, and tears into is, that is everything to my dad.
You really have to come up to the vineyard and check it out to understand that everything is organized, precise, clean.
This is a Swiss person saying this. So that's,
I really love working with him. So it's absolutely awesome. So for us, the transition wasn't really big to get the verification. I think the biggest change is a mindset change. It's more to go from reactive measurements to be proactive. So what we did is we integrated sheep into our farming system. We increased the biodiversity in the vineyard with perennials and other seeds, and on the backfield around. The biggest change that we actually did is we don't cultivate underneath the wine rows anymore, so we didn't disc anyway. But now we don't cultivate underneath the wine row, so you don't have bare soil anywhere on the vineyard.
So that I would say, like Michael mentioned, the biggest thing is that shift in mindset. Because, like I said, he was already keeping a very, like, his cover crop mix. He keeps an eye on what he needs in his soil. He's got actually a lot of nitrogen in his soil, so he wants to pull. He adapts his cover crop mix anyways.
Right.
So, and in our land to market baseline, we realized our biodiversity could be a little bit better in the vineyard. We do obviously mow, and
after bud break,
and then
right.
One of our biggest things was actually this vine row. So he was using a undercutter but
Right.
which was, laying over a mulch and things like that. But the thought to not do or to just mow was like a big hurdle for my dad. And it was this big discussion because for him, he's like, I'm dry farming. I don't want to have, cover grasses pulling water from my vines. And I was like, Dad, remember that conversation that you told me your vines are like on their way to China, like way deep in the soil, like this, we are talking like the top couple of inches versus deeps. Like your vines are so deep into, a completely different water source. This is actually going to keep more water in your soil and, not let it get so hot and all these things. And sequester more carb and all these things. And that just like, it took so long to just create like enough space for him to understand a different perspective of looking at things.
It's also an optical thing, so you try to bring back nature, and nature just is wild and biodiverse and
looks messy. Yeah.
And when you look back how vineyards look, or when you drive down to Paso Robles and farther and stuff, and you look the vineyards, it's organized, it's mowed, it's cultivated, it's bare soil and stuff. So it's definitely not wild and biodiverse. So
that was one of our. I mean,
now,
yeah. So
were you able to? How were you able to create space for him? I mean, was it just? I mean, were you able to show that there wasn't competition after a vintage or two, where you're like, sort of, let's try this out and you'll see, or kind of thing? Or how did that work? And did you have any results that you could show him to convince him?
Honestly, what was this is a couple of years ago now, because I was butting heads with him about it, and at the end of the day, my mom, who really doesn't pull rank and really doesn't, she kind of, is usually doesn't speak up too much, and she was like, you're not gonna cultivate that.
There's a second perspective to that. My wife and I, we have different perspectives from time to time. So there's a second perspective, because to go down this regenerative path has two reasons, or we did it out of two reasons. One reason is, as I mentioned before, it's amazing. You bring back biodiversity, sequestering carbon. It's the right thing to do. You preserve ecosystems, or you build up ecosystems for future generation. That's one thing. The other thing is we were actually able to differentiate our vineyard in the ocean of wine. So through this Savory land to market path, we are outcome based verified. We are the only vineyard in California that has this seal. We can prove regeneration. We increase demand, and we increased our profitability. And these are reasons that are pretty convincing to change some farming practices too.
Got it. Yeah. So there is a economic financial benefit as well that you could dangle as a carrot there, where you get a marketing opportunity.
Yeah, you don't have to sell over price, because prices are not mind blowing anyway. So if you can differentiate, and if you can create value, not only value for Mariah Vineyards, also value for the winemakers and the producers that buy fruit from us. So we were able this year. We got the seal. We have the seal on our bottles, because our land is verified. And in this year, we were actually able to provide the land to market seal to the wineries that want to use it, that make single vineyard wines out of it. So we really try to create value along the supply chain.
That's great. I think that's part of. I mean, I was just talking about this recently, where it's that is the great thing about some of these regenerative practices, or all of these regenerative practices, it really is win-win. Like a lot of times it reduces costs, increases revenue, and does good for the world. So you get,
Yeah, and
yeah,
in California especially, it creates you're building climate resilience.
Yeah, I was just going to say you build a
yeah,
lot of resilience with that biodiversity. I mean,
And that's finally the thing that decides if you are in business or if you are not anymore in business in the future. So
yeah,
and
yeah.
you can
That's
really see it just in the last couple of years. Like, I mean, when I was a kid, I probably didn't pay as much attention as I do now, but like even just in the last couple of years, like there's more butterflies, there's spiders all over in the vineyard. Like there is like the leaves are of the vines just look awesomely healthy and lush. Not that they didn't before, but there is just like there's something like alive like about the entire place, that feels, like it's buzzing, and I think that is amazing that you can like have a vineyard and create a crop, and do it like in harmony with your ecosystem. And I think that's really, really important.
that's also really fulfilling to
Yeah.
farm like that.
So,
yeah. I
so it's
really, as much as I love everything else that you guys have done, I love the dry farming. Especially now in California, I really love it.
yeah.
I mean, I really think when we talk about terroir, that really has to be part of the discussion. Like to leave, like to talk about terroir when you just have a vineyard that relies on irrigation for existence is kind of
Mm.
bullshit, frankly.
There was we visited several regenerative pioneers a few years ago, and we went also down to Tablas Creek, and it was really interesting. They pulled a vineyard, and they had actually two rootstocks there. One was on a drip, and one was dry farmed, and it was extremely impressive to see how the roots developed on the ground. So
Mm.
the with irrigation, they were shallow along the dripper,
Horizontal.
horizontal,
Wow.
and the dry farmed really went
Like
deep,
4 feet,
deep.
6 feet
So
deep.
so
Wow.
I 100% agree with that when you speak about terroir and an expression of place, that deep roots are probably the way to go. Yeah.
Makes sense. Well, what are some of the outcomes that are looked at by the land to market verification? Can you talk about the sort of the big ones and what that looks like in your vineyard?
Soil health is a big part. Ecosystem function and biodiversity are pillars, and it's amazing.
Water
So
holding
so
capacity.
so it's amazing. A verifier comes to your land, and then you define short-term sites and long-term sites, and then you take different soil samples and you do water
They do
infiltration
it. They do
rates,
it.
and you are on your knees and you're counting biodiversity in your vineyard.
But wait, can I just say we helped do it because
Yeah.
we wanted to. As a farmer, you don't have to come and just as an FYI, like because
Got it.
farmers
Got it.
are busy and they don't want to sit on the computer and they surely don't want to count grasses
Right.
along a
Yeah.
transect line either. So we did it because we were super interested. My dad, yeah, he was on the tractor or whatever. Just
Yeah. He had other things to do.
sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
Yeah, but you have a pretty good overview over your land, and it's in perspective of your ecosystem that you're in. So
It's in
what
context.
it's in context. That's a language per year. I'm sorry. It's in context with your ecosystem. I think
Yeah.
you can't. I think there is not one solution fits all. So we have 60 to 90 inches of rain. All right. So we have timber soils, you can't farm this place the same way like you farm a vineyard with 3 inches in Paso Robles, you know.
Right.
So
Yeah.
and that's really that's what was really intriguing for us. So it's in context with the ecosystems and it's result based. So nobody comes to you and says, don't do that. It's a result. After 1 year, you measure it again, and then you see if you actually improved or not.
Got it. Did they continue to come back after that first year? Is it
Yeah,
like
sure.
Yes.
you? Okay, so
It's
you have
every
to
year.
continue to. Now, what happens if your soil organic matter diminishes from 1 year to the next? Do you lose your certification? I
It's
know I'm asking kind of a stupid question, but I just
no,
want
no,
to.
no. It's a good question. So the whole monitoring results in ecological health index, and organic matter is one part of that.
Mhm.
That's so if you decrease there, you increase in other stuff. You're still improving,
Regenerating.
and everything is in context with a reference site in the ecosystem, so you can actually see climate impacts, and they count for it. So
But
Got it.
ultimately, these so a lot of things take time to change or regenerate. Your soil is going to fluctuate year to year, but that's where they do the bigger long term studies and the I guess more thorough soil testing is every 5 years actually, and not every single year, because otherwise you'd be like fluctuating back and forth all the time on these kind of
Right.
short sight, right? So
Got it.
it's
Yeah.
not to say that, so really like you have to give, nature and your soil and your farming system the time to adapt. But they just have different metrics for the annual
to verify,
monitoring,
yeah.
and then the 5 year kind of back to doing another, I guess you could call, it's not really a baseline, but it's another much more thorough monitoring that happens on the 5 year mark. And we just passed our 3 year
Yeah,
mark.
but it's awesome. It's based on the results. It's not based on practices. So
And there's no computer time.
Nice.
I don't personally understand how you can get certifications based on tracking processes. Yeah, I understand it, but if you're a heavy smoker and you smoke 20 cigarettes and then suddenly you only smoke 18 a day, and then you get a sustainable certification for it, I don't really get that. And then what I loved on the Savory Institute is really they didn't really care how much that I smoke. They looked at my lungs, and they
Yeah.
looked at my lungs are good and clean and healthy and stuff, and then you get the certification.
No, that's a good analogy. I like that. Um, you mentioned earlier that nitrogen might be too plentiful in the vineyard, and do you want to talk about what that caused? I know that you're probably talking about excessive vigor and vegetative growth, which can diminish wine quality. Is that correct?
Yes, and
So,
we have
so
we have so much nitrogen in our soil because we have a field of clover. We have rose
got it.
clover, we
Got
have
it.
crimson clover, and
And
Dan
those are all
seeded,
nitrogen
and
fixers, right?
yeah, and Dan seeded that years ago, and it comes back every year, and it's beautiful.
Lovely. So you could be in a position where you want to not necessarily decrease organic matter, but maybe that would be the result to increase wine quality. Is that realistic? Am I
I mean, I don't think we would. I mean, I don't think decreasing soil organic matter is necessarily the target. I think it's more about
No,
just
it's the opposite.
balancing the nutrients in the soil a little
And in
bit.
the wine, yeah.
Yeah, and in the last couple of years we currently do not have our own sheep, but we contract graze sheep in the vineyard, which is awesome. And
Yeah.
I that was a really big piece of our step into this regenerative space. I mean, sheep are just, I mean, or animal integration I should say, is amazing, because they're these sheep, they're these awesome little compost fermenting machines out there that are, cycling your nutrients for you. And they're mowing your grass. And my dad will remind me many times that he still has to mow his grass later in the season after bud break and all these things. But they are awesome. They're able to cycle your cover crop nutrients right back there on the spot into your soil. And I think that is incredibly valuable, as a way to integrate, other fertilizers and your nutrients back into that like local cycle.
I think about fruit quality. I think the biggest two things that happened where we increased fruit quality is the dry farming aspect. It definitely lowered the yields, but it increased quality, and no chemical use definitely too.
Wow. Yeah. Well, since you brought up no chemical use, let's talk about that. So, since this land to market is outcome based, technically you could judiciously use chemicals, I imagine, as long as it doesn't impact these things that get measured. I know you choose not to, and I just wanted to sort of talk about that because that could be one of the criticisms. I mean, the criticism of organic, I would say, is that a conventional person can just sort of not have a shift in mindset and just change the products that they're using, and they can just substitute out
Exactly.
whatever for whatever agrochemical in a bottle for whatever organic chemical in a bottle, and continue to do the same kind of practices.
And
So
copper is
yeah,
a big one.
copper is not great.
And it's organic.
I think with the results that are getting measured, by the ecological outcome verification, you see the impacts of chemicals.
Right.
You see the results in soil health, in soil life. You see the results in biodiversity. You see the results in bare soil. So chemical use will definitely influence your outcomes.
Right.
You'd be shooting yourself in the foot, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But and I think we both agree that the path forward to regeneration and soil health is no pesticides and chemical use. I think this discussion is really interesting, and but also think that it's a bit hypocritical, because when you speak about soil health and you put everything on the head on no chemical use, but you don't start a discussion about heavy copper use in your vineyard,
Or about tractor passes
an
and
organic product, I think then it's not 100% transparent. So
yeah, that's a really good point too.
And that's the other thing too. Like there was an article a couple of years ago I remember reading about, is organic. I mean, I'm not like, I think organic. I mean, I'm 100% about organic farming, but it was this article that really made me like start having a couple of questions around, like it was about like, is organic farming really carbon farming, right? And what is carbon farming anyways? But like ultimately, this idea that, when you're organically farming and whatever, you decide to put in your sprayer that's organic, that isn't conventional, or, sulfur or whatever, but, you have to get, or stylite oil or whatever, and you have to get out there every 7 to 8 days to stay on top of this. Now your diesel tractor is compacting your ground. It's obviously polluting. It's you're depending on fossil fuels. Like there's a lot of other components that I think, solely looking at farming organically is one part of a larger picture of farming, with much more of like a, I don't know, regenerative or holistic approach about how do I minimize these, effects, or make it more efficient yet impactful, and don't spray. It's a hard line to walk.
Another thought is how, what's the goal, right? Is the goal to advance regenerative agriculture and change the world? Then you have to find the spot where the farmer is now, and you really have to guide them on this path. Or is your goal to certify the regenerative farms that are out there already? So and that would intrigue me. So I'm against chemical use, absolutely. We would see it in our outcomes, but I think an outcome-based solution is the path forward to actually transform a viticulture.
That's a really great point. Yeah, that you
To
bring
be a
up where
climate solution.
yeah, you could be a great sustainable farmer like your parents, Nicole, for years, and so the moodle the moodle that's a fun word. The needle doesn't need to move very far in determining these outcomes. Like you know a few
Mhm.
changes of practices, maybe eliminate a chemical here or there, and those are the big changes, not big changes at all. Versus, but if you're measuring outcomes, that applies to somebody like you and your situation, but it also applies to somebody who's just been, nuking their
Like
farm
spraying for
with
years. Yeah.
chemicals, and they can stop using a few of those chemicals and see a big improvement from year to
Exactly.
year, and so it reaches them where they are as well. And that's still doing good. It's moving the needle in the right direction. I love
It's
that. That's
yeah,
a really good point.
but
It, do-
not
it
nuking. Well, not nuking. Yeah,
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 right, right.
Yeah.
yeah.
Use that
It's
as
still
yeah.
it's still regenerative, you know. So
Right. No, I mean, like somebody who is at that point where they're maybe the worst possible farming we could imagine, that's still considered farming, and yet it can apply to them because if they take a few steps,
yeah.
if they start taking steps in the right direction, sure, they're going to be way behind somebody who, like your parents and their transition, but they're moving in the right direction, and you can measure that. And so it's a way to
So
encourage that, it sounds like.
it's also when you speak with farmers on the ground, it doesn't mean they want to have a backup, you know,
Right, right.
that when shit hits the fan and you're really close to losing your crop, and then you grab back and you use something to save your crop, you know, that's a big argument in
In the
our
farming world.
discussions that we have.
With all sorts
Right.
of
And I
farmers.
rather have a farmer that is spraying once something to save his crop, and then a farmer that is driving 20 times with his sprayer to the vineyard and is putting out copper, a heavy metal during the year. You know, I can guarantee you that when you look at the outcomes, that the guy that sprays once will have better soil life results than the guy that drives 20 times with his tractor with copper through the vineyard.
Right. Got
And
it.
that's probably not something that I should say, and I'm definitely not a fan of chemicals. That's why we farm organically, but we are not certified, because these are costs that no
And
winery is willing to pay me more just because I have a certification.
And like you mentioned earlier, the
So
farmers.
but we still have the possibility to grab back if really everything falls apart.
right. Sorry, Nicole, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, the farmer, and their livelihood is that crop. So in most cases, I mean, I know in the vineyard world, I mean, I don't have stats to back this up, but I just had a couple months ago a recent discussion with my dad about just vineyards around like our area, and realizing that like my dad is like an anomaly in like our local. I
In what
guess I'm
sense?
just really like understanding the viticulture world, that like very few people are really kind of doing it all like he is up there on that mountaintop, which you could
What do you
argue
mean
is
by that?
crazy. Huh?
What do you mean by that? Doing it all?
I mean, I mean, they are farming that property. I mean, he is on the tractor. We don't, I mean, he gets crews here and there when he can, but he doesn't have a vineyard management company. He is the owner, operator, farmer, like, everything. Michael's up there farming with him, but ultimately it's just them. You know what I mean? There is not this big resource behind. And
Right.
that is something that, like, I just figured, because I grew up like that's just how vineyards were. And I think that those family rooted, like, all on the ground, everybody helping out is more rare than I thought it was.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm happy to get to be part of the story of, moving Mariah Vineyards into the future and into this regenerative farming space. Like, I'm really proud of the work that Michael and I have been able to successfully accomplish with my parents. And it's a balancing act. It's challenging. I mean, I talk to my dad all the time. I usually catch him at like 6:30 in the morning on my way to work. Driving to the hospital is when he's awake and already out on the tractor or whatever, and we can have discussions about important things that we need to get done or talk about. And then, I find myself often sitting in the hospital thinking about this compost application or these other things that I've been working on, and leading back to, balancing all these things. But I'm really, really proud of the efforts that him and my mom have put into to really, like,
Yeah, it's awesome.
to really support this process and move in this direction. Because I think it's really important, and they agree. They do know that it is important for, the sustainability and long term, resilience of the farm that my parents
And
have
the
built,
business.
and the business, but have built out of, literally just a mountaintop, and what
Yeah.
they've created up there. Like, I'm not willing to let that fall apart. And I think the way forward is to farm regeneratively in, harmony with our ecosystem, and do our best to create resilience and increase biodiversity and bring back bees and butterflies and create
And
mind-blowing, grapes and great wines at the same times. I think that it's possible. And I think so far we're proving that it's possible. And I'm really excited to hopefully advance this, regeneration in any way possible.
I would like to include outcome based regeneration. It bothers me. Everybody or a lot of vineyards are claiming these improvements, but just a few can back it up. And I would
Yeah.
love to see more that go out and say we regenerate our land, and that's how that's how we can see it in our results, and that's really what it is.
Yeah, I like that. And I know we've been talking a lot about soil, but maybe we should mention dirt, directly impacting regenerative transformation. How is that part of what you're doing right now?
That's Nicole and my baby, and that's it's all about advancing regenerative agriculture. So we really believe that the rising tide lifts all the ships. So we are working with dirt on three pillars. One is empowering farmers to join and to jump on the regenerative transformation. We are on phone calls with vineyards in Italy and South Africa, and of course in California. The second pillar is
and that is also across the board, like any kind of regenerate. There doesn't have to be with a specific certification or this or that, because there's a lot. I mean, biodynamics is amazing. ROC, there's a lot of options out there.
Right.
As a side note, sorry.
Yeah, but it's also if somebody is interested to learn more or to get connected with certifications and stuff, we're more than welcome to share our experience with that we have as Savory's first land to market verified vineyard on the financial side, but also on the farming side. And then we work with producers. Try to cross promote and build collaborations to spark and inspire some consumers out there. We did social media promotion this week, actually, with one of our land to market partners, Applegate, where we combined some rosé and Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot with their land to market verified meat, actually, with their hot dogs.
Yeah, I saw that. That looked that looked tasty. That looked fun.
Well, it's kind of trying to break structures a little bit, and create these awesome. I mean,
yeah, I think it's the
regeneration
same.
is
I think it's the same consumer that drinks a bottle of wine and that eats regenerative meat and stuff. And we really try to break out of these existing industry silos, So
Yeah.
why not combining a wine with CBD or with fashion, or just let's do that. And
Yes.
then the final goal and the final pillar is to empower conscious consumers, and that's
to support regenerative.
We're working on a solution to do that, but I can't really speak about that so far. But I'm more than happy to come to another podcast and everything.
Fantastic. We will definitely do this again. That sounds great. Well, tell what have we left out? Like, what should we cover in terms of land to market, or anything that you guys want to say about what you're doing? I want to wrap this up, but I don't want to leave anything out. What haven't we talked about?
We've covered a lot, I think.
We covered a lot.
Okay, great.
I think let's cover it up with facts.
Great.
And outcomes. Land to market and the ecological outcome verification are outcome based and result based. At Mariah Vineyards, we were able to build climate resilience. We were able to increase profitability of our business. We were able to
build amazing collaborations,
to build ecosystems, increase biodiversity, and all that stuff. And through that, we have now the capability to build collaborations and have discussions with vineyards. And it's so inspiring, and it's so purpose driven, and it's so amazing. And if anybody is interested, we are more than welcome to support and advance regenerative transformation. Definitely.
And
well,
if anybody can identify with these kind of generational mindset, hurdles. I know I've had some conversations like Carrie Richards from Richards Grass Fed and things like that, but it's a challenge. And even recently, my mom said somebody was up there and she was like, how did your daughter get your husband to do this? And she's like, I need to talk to her, so I just, I can't, there's no single answer. I think it's been a wild ride, and it still is. And I love every minute of it, and it's great, and it's worth it. It's worth it it's worth it to work, in between these generational lines, and find a new level of respect, and admiration and wisdom that exists, in, from my parents' generation, that he can see some, I kind of take him outside of his comfort zone, and hopefully he respects that. I don't know. We'll see. Jury's still out on that one, but
where is he now with everything? Does he feel like it's worth it at this point?
Oh, we are walking into harvest, so he is. Yeah.
We have our first pick in December, but he's really committed to regenerative agriculture, and it's amazing. It's actually, Nicole mentioned that there's a lot of friction and tension and discussion, but it's amazing. But it's amazing how the willingness from my parents-in-law to change, to try new stuff, and to launch land to market verified wines, and to do all of that. So it's awesome. So they're committed and dedicated, and it's a quite amazing ride, actually.
And he's really happy. And even just I applied for a grant for some compost to regenerate our backfield area, and was granted it. And he was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" How, like so it's good. We're able to work together to really do some good stuff. So I'm really happy, and he's stoked. He's in a good place, and we're about to start harvest, and it'll be an interesting year. Every year is different. Like this was something I heard. I think it was a John Kemp podcast or something. I was working in the vineyard one day, and I thought it was such an amazing comment from, I forget even which farmer was on there, but he said, something along the lines of, you must have a lot of experience because you've had, 40 years of experience. And then this farmer's response was, I've had 40 different experiences. And I remember telling my dad this, and he was like, "That is so true." But I often have to remind my dad of that, because be like, "Dad, remember, you don't have 40 years of or 42 years of experience. You have 42 different experiences. And walking into every year and every harvest and every growing season is literally a new beast, especially with climate."
It's also challenging to work with us, So we all have our ideas. We all have our ideas, and really, I give both of them massive credit that they go along with our craziness, really.
And anybody who knows my dad knows that, Anyway,
it's saying something.
Well, thank you so much for having us. And
thank you. Yeah, what are your websites and Insta, like social media? How do people get in touch or find out more and follow along?
Yeah, follow along. At Mariah_Vineyards is the handle for Mariah Vineyards Instagram, and it's Mariah Vineyards on Facebook.
And MariahVineyards.com. That's for the vineyard. And if you want to connect with us, and then it's
dirt wine. Just dirt_wine. And that's kind of, following our regenerative impact journey, and all the different things that we're up to. So yes, please follow along, and, obviously reach out, like DM us anytime. And we're, we are dedicated to accelerating regeneration in any and every way we can. So even in healthcare. So anybody has cool ideas.
We need that. Thank you guys so much. It's been great talking to you and learning about this. It's another important thing that I think lots of people can benefit from. So thanks for sharing.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very
much. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. And if you did, please do leave a review for the Organic Wine Podcast. It helps a lot, and we want to get the word out to as many people as we can, which your review will help do. Thanks so much.